Alrighty, guys. So today I'm trying out something new. I've been wanting to do a video series for a while now where I just read, where I find a book, something that's piqued my interest, something that's woken me up over the past few years, got me thinking, and I've been debating for probably about the last month or two what I was going to do with it. And I think after the Olympics over in Paris, I got an idea. So back when I was in Antifa, for those that are familiar, one of the things that drove me away was the fact that I actually enjoyed researching Nazis and wanted to learn more about Nazis. And you would think being a part of an anti-fascist organization, that would be something that you would want. But ultimately, what I was doing was unspeakable. How could you possibly be looking into these texts? How could you possibly be making these comparisons? Who are you to go searching for this type of information online and from other people? And all I really ever had to say to that was, I'm going to read whatever the hell I want, do whatever the hell I want. So, a product of that was here, I have this binder, and I got a lot more like it too, where I've just collected manifestos, Nazi writings, alien stuff, crazy literature, various different accounts of demonology, occult, ritual, stuff like that, because, hey, that's my shit. So, the one that I'm choosing to read to you today is the Grimoire of Baphomet, the Dark Goddess. And this is from the Order of the Nine Angles, which is a European neo-Nazi group with very, very heavy ties to Satanism. So, one of the things that got me real interested in this type of subject in particular, like outside of the normal Nazis, Holocaust, hate the Jews, yada, 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 pitchforks and torches, all the standard shit, the cult aspects get really crazy. So back when I lived in Texas, I knew somebody who was very much into body modification culture, taboo culture, very much into the occult, and also had ties to white supremacy. So stories from this person included, at one point, him carving a pentagram out of his ribs, ripping the flesh off, putting it onto a pan, searing it, and eating it. He also had his dick split down the middle, held together with, I think they're called no, not Prince Albert, some sort of rings that were going down that would hold it in place, essentially, and the man had to sit to pee. Ouija board usage, knew all sorts of shit about demons and ghosts, which made the Nazi shit a lot less scary for me because I was very much younger at the time. But another thing that he did that really surprised me, that always stuck with me, was severed off his pinky fingers and his pinky toes. And I remember asking someone once, I was just like, why the fuck did he do that? And essentially, if you go into the occult and Aryan beliefs about the future and aliens and demonology and all this, the Aryan race is the race that is allegedly within these texts destined to operate spaceships. And that in order to operate these spaceships, certain evolutional requirements would have to be met. One of those evolutionary requirements is ultimately, as time goes on, the pinky fingers and the pinky toes are ultimately becoming more and more useless. And I believe his thought pattern was it's happening quicker in white people, and that's something that like kind of goes along with the theory. But yeah, it had a lot to do with that and the tall whites and the aliens in Antarctica, and it's just like it opens your fucking mind to a lot of crazy shit. So I read a lot of crazy shit, and that's really just kind of what I want to bring to the table and share with you guys today, word for word, verbatim. Past this intro, there will be no, I'm not going to give my opinions, I'm not going to tell any stories. I just want to read this and everything that it is, word for word, and just get it out to you guys to hear. All right. So without further ado, the Grimoire of Baphomet. According to dark tradition, Baphomet is a sinister acausal entity depicted as a mature human woman, naked from the waist up, who holds in her hand the bloodied severed head of a young human man. She is the dark, violent goddess, the real mistress of Earth, to whom human sacrifices were and are made. She, as one of the dark entities, as vampires to the dark gods, the dark immortals, is also a shapeshifter who can presence in the causal dimensions and assume human form, and thus live among us here on Earth. And it was traditionally to Baphomet that the initiates and adepts of our dark tradition
dedicated their chosen, selected victims when a human culling was undertaken and when wars and conflict were brought forth or seeded through sinister sorcery. Associated with Baphomet are other dark female acausal entities, some of whom have existed hidden on Earth for millennia, and who maintain causal, ageless, and secret existence by feeding off the acausal life force of their male human victims, whom they entrap and test using sexual enchantment, and which victims die after all of their life force has been sucked away. These other entities are the dark daughters of Baphomet, and they, like their mistress, the Mother of Blood, are thus, in a quite literal sense, beautiful, cultured, alluring, but also predatory vampires, whose needed and necessary food is not blood, but rather that acausal energy that animates human beings and makes them alive. These vampiric beings, shapeshifted into alluring female human form, can spawn, and according to legend have, half human offspring if they so desire, and if they find a suitable human male, as they can also gift that male or other chosen human males or females with the gift of much extended mortal life in the realms of the causal, and can provide such chosen ones with the opportunity to aggress in the acausal and thus life as immortal acausal entities there. According to oral dark tradition, there are several types, several different species of sinister acausal entities, with Baphomet and her shape-shifting daughters being of one type and having a certain nature, a particular character, a certain consciousness when presented in the causal, and so when indwelling in human form. One other more primal, more primitive acausal species is known to us, and when beings of this particular species are present on Earth in human form or otherwise, they act, behave, live quite differently from Baphomet and her kin. For these more primal savage beings are as demons who causally live only to unthinkably consume human lives so that, once satiated, they may be returned to the darkness of their acausal home. Sinister tradition speaks of the dark gods as specific living entities, living beings of particular acausal species who exist in the realms of the acausal continuum, with some of these entities having been presenced via various Nexians on Earth in our distant past. Once at the dawn of our consciousness as human beings, some of these acausal entities came forth to Earth through a physical Nexian, which probably most existed on this planet. There's also been speculation about, and some oral legends regarding how long these dark acausal entities stayed in our causal time and space, and much speculation regarding why they left, with one oral legend asserting that a few of them have, as shapeshifters, survived and hidden themselves among us, feeding, waiting for the stars to be aligned just right again and for sinister adepts to bring forth their kin. Sinister tradition has preserved several meanings, various dark rituals, ceremonies, and rites, whereby some or many of these acausal sinister entities can be brought back to or presenced on this planet, which we human beings call Earth. And for this next part, I'm going to skip over the rituals. The full PDF will be available in the description, but I don't want to describe to you guys how to operate a human sacrifice. So if you want human sacrifice and drinking blood and sex magic and animal killing and all that shit, the following rituals, we have the ceremony of recalling. Let's see here. The sinister rite of the 9 angles, the rite of the star game, the rite of acausal existence, and yeah, we will move on from there. Again, link will be available in the description below. But from here, we move on to the nature of reality according to traditional Satanism. The fundamental ontological axioms of the sinister way of traditional Satanism are: 1. There are 2 types of being, differentiated by whether or not they possess or manifest what is termed acausal energy, and 2, that we can only correctly and currently know a manifestation of acausal energy and a causal being throughout our currently underdeveloped and underused psychic faculties. Reality, for traditional Satanism, is postulated to be the cosmos, with this cosmos having a bifurcation of being. That is, the cosmos exists, is manifest in both causal spacetime and in what we term as acausal spacetime. Causal spacetime has 3 causal spatial dimensions and 1 causal time dimension, and a causal spacetime has n number, a currently undefined number of acausal dimensions, which are not spatial, and an acausal time dimension. Causal space-time can thus be considered to the phenomenal physical universe that we are aware of through our senses, and this universe is governed by physical laws and contains physical, causal matter and energy. According to traditional Satanism, all causal beings existing or having their being in the causal physical universe are understood as a presencing in the causal of a causal being or energy by the fact that they are alive. That is, all causal living beings are connections or nexions between the causal and between the causal and acausal continuums. The being of nature. Nature may be defined as that innate creativity or acausal force or energy which operates in the physical world on this planet and which causes or is the genesis of and controls causal living organisms in certain ways. These certain ways are the laws of nature. The evolution of species is a term used to describe one theory about one of the ways in which nature is assumed to work in the causal universe or the causal continuum. Nature can thus be conceived as a type of being. This does not mean that nature should be understood in an anthropomorphic terms, but rather that nature is a living, changing entity, something which is alive. That is, nature is another example of a nexion, of where there is a connection between the causal continuum and the acausal continuum. We ourselves as human beings are simply, on planet Earth, one manifestation or one presencing of nature among many. That is, we are subject to the laws of nature and the laws which govern organic change and organic life itself. Like all causal life on this planet, we causal beings are born, we grow and change, and our causal being dies. That is, ceases to be imbued with, to be animated by, a causal energy. That is, we cease to have a causal life. Most Earth cultures had or have a belief that nature is living and the mother of the bringer forth of all life. In olden times, nature herself was often personified in terms of gods and goddesses. That is, we apprehended nature in terms of ourselves, in terms of the individual causal beings with names, a history, and a distinct personality. However, this type of apprehension is no longer necessary nor valid since we have developed over the last few thousand years the faculty of pure reason and the faculty of acausal empathy, and can understand nature, ourselves, and the cosmos beyond nature in a natural manner without such intermediate abstract forms. That is, we can now apprehend nature as nature is. Hitherto, we projected human-type causal forms onto nature into an effort to comprehend nature as we did not possess much of an understanding of the cosmos beyond nature and beyond the causal, and now nature is but a part of this causal and acausal cosmos. The philosophy of traditional Satanism. The essential starting point for philosophy is to pose and answer the questions about the origin and meaning of life, or more specifically, about our causal lives as human beings in the causal universe on this planet that we call Earth. Traditional Satanism does not believe that we human beings and causal life itself was created by some supreme being, which is commonly referred to as God. According to traditional Satanism, life evolved naturally on this planet from finite beings we as yet do not precisely understand. The essence of the traditional Satanism perspective about our origins in the causal universe is reason, or rather what used to be called natural philosophy. Through observation, experiment, and the use of reason or logic, we can understand our world, the causal cosmos, and ourselves. Thus, traditional Satanism is, in one important respect, a rationalist way of life which accepts one, that the causal universe, or causal reality, exists independently of us and our consciousness, and thus independent of our senses. 2. Our limited understanding of this causal external world depends for the most part upon our senses, that is, on what we can see, hear, or touch, that is, on what we can observe or come to know via our senses. 3. Logical argument, reason, and experiment are the best means to knowledge and understanding of and about the external world. 4. The causal universe is, of itself, a reasoned order subject to rational laws. And 5. Our faculty of acausal empathy is a means for us to know the nexion we are and how we can discover our correct relationship to all other life. Thus, practical reason, natural philosophy, enables us to comprehend the external, physical, causal universe. Furthermore, traditional Satanism also affirms that the knowledge and understanding of the causal universe, achieved by means of reason and observation, is not the only type of knowledge and understanding available to us, and there is knowledge and understanding of which the acausal continuum and the acausal beings who or which exist and live there, and that our psychic faculties enable us to sense, to begin to know, and are of only one means of comprehending acausal life in all of its variety and forms. An axiom of traditional Satanism is that by developing our latent psychic faculties, we gain a better understanding and more knowledge of nature, of the acausal, and of acausal beings, and thus of ourselves. The answers of traditional Satanism. The philosophy of traditional Satanism accepts that the purpose of our mortal causal lives is essentially twofold. First, to change, to develop, to evolve ourselves, and to explore and to enjoy the possibility that causal life offers. For our mortal causal life is a limited, finite opportunity. Second, that if we develop and evolve ourselves in a particular way, and especially if we develop our psychic faculties, there exists the possibility of us as a new type of being living on beyond our causal death in the acausal continuum. Thus, the philosophy of traditional Satanism asserts 1. That we human beings possess the potential to participate in and to control our own evolution. That is, we have the mostly latent ability to consciously evolve and to become the genesis of a new human species, and that genuine esoteric arts, and especially, and in particular, the dark arts, are one of the most viable ways by which such a conscious evolution can occur. 2. That genuine esoteric knowledge and insight, and thus genuine self-understanding and self-evolution, requires both a development of our latent psychic faculties and a practical knowledge of the acausal continuum deriving from a coming to know of acausal beings. 3. That what has hitherto been known and described as magic, especially dark sorcery or black magic, is one effective means of coming to know certain acausal beings and is thus a beginning to understand the acausal itself. Our psychic faculties include what may be termed as causal empathy, otherwise known as sinister empathy or esoteric or magical empathy, and of acausal thinking. Acausal empathy is basically a sensitivity to and awareness of acausal energies, as these energies are present in living beings and nature, and or presence in the causal either via some acausal being or directly as raw acausal energy. That is, acausal energy trying to find some causal form to inhabit. Various esoteric means and techniques exist to develop such acausal empathy. Acausal thinking is basically apprehending the causal and acausal energy as these things are, that is, beyond all causal abstractions and beyond all causal symbols and symbolism, where such causal symbols include language and the words and terms that are part of the language, and what has hitherto been regarded as the terms and symbols of conventional occultism. For such conventional occultism is ineluctably bound to casual thinking. Various genuine esoteric means and techniques exist to develop such acausal thinking. An important aspect of acausal thinking is thinking in terms of acausal time. That is, not in terms of the linear cause and effect of the causal continuum, but rather in what can be inaccurately described as the terms of simultaneity of there being action and distance, unlike in conventional or causal physics. The living beings of the acausal. According to traditional Satanism, there are several types of distinct acausal beings who exist in the acausal continuum, known to us historically and otherwise from adepts who have developed acausal empathy and acausal thinking, have discovered or come to know of such beings. Acausal beings are beyond our casual concepts and abstractions. Some dwell and can only exist in the acausal spaces, while others can dwell or be manifest in both the acausal and the causal, where there being many different types of acausal entities, all of which have their own nature or type of being. Essentially, they have no physical form as we define and understand physical form, for example, a body, although some types of acausal beings who can dwell or manifest or be present in our causal spaces can dwell within or presence themselves within or be present within a causal form such as a living body or being, and some of the acausal beings who can or who have done this are known to us as shapeshifters. We cannot see or detect by our limited physical senses unpresented acausal beings who may be transiting through or dwelling within our causal spaces, if such beings have not accessed or presence themselves in some sort of causal living form, even though in some case, or even in most cases, even if they have done this. However, some of us, in some other life, may sometimes feel or be aware of such acausal beings. For example, if we possess a certain type of empathy or have the esoteric knowledge to detect some such transiting or indwelling acausal beings. Since these acausal beings are beyond our causal concepts and abstractions, it is incorrect to judge such beings according to our limited causal morality. They are neither good nor evil. They live according to their own nature as acausal beings, just as, for an example, a wild predatory animal lives according to its wild predatory nature. According to esoteric tradition, there are some acausal beings who are drawn or have been in the past been drawn towards our causal spaces because they do or have acquired the ability to feed off of certain types of emotions or states of being, emotion just simply being another type of energy. Due to the nature of the acausal spaces and thus the nature of acausal energy, acausal beings do not die as we do die and do not age as we age. Furthermore, our concept of physical travel or movement, which takes causal time, is irrelevant to and does not apply to such beings due to their very nature as acausal beings. However, most of these beings are not, by our standards, all powerful, and many cannot change or restructure temporal things, just as some cannot transit to or be presenced in the causal spaces or dwell within causal beings without some aid or assistance in opening a nexion or nexions. According to tradition, some of these known acausal beings have been collectively described by the term the dark gods, the dark ones, or the dark immortals. And included in this particular type of acausal being is the entity more commonly known to us as Satan, and that entity which we limited causal mortal beings describe as the female counterpart of Satan, who, according to the dark tradition inherited by the Order of Nine Angles, has the name Baphomet, and who is the dark, violent goddess, the real mistress of earth and of nature, to whom human sacrifices were and are made, and who ritualistically and symbolically washes in a basin full of the blood of her victims. According to oral legend, she, as one of the dark gods, is also a shapeshifter who has intruded or visited to or been present or manifested on Earth in times past, and who can manifest again if certain rituals are performed and certain sacrifices are made. Traditionally, it was to Baphomet that initiates and adepts of the dark tradition dedicated their chosen select victims when a human culling was undertaken, and such cullings were, and are, regarded one of the prerequisites for attaining sinister adeptship. Importantly, traditional Satanism does not regard Satan or any of the dark ones, such as Baphomet, as conventional gods or goddesses, as they are understood, and thus as beings to be worshipped, feared, and obeyed in a conventional religious sense. Instead, they are regarded as sinister friends, as newfound companions, and may be likened to the long-lost sisters and brothers or other relatives, and, in the case of Satan and Baphomet, as akin to our hitherto unknown mother and father, and to thus be admired and respected, but never worshipped. In addition, and in the case of some of these dark entities, they are, or can be considered to us, to be lovers. Thus, our relationship to these acausal beings is certainly not one of fear, nor of subservience. In addition, the term the dark gods is to be understood as but a useful, somewhat old aeon, that based on causal thinking, inherited exotic term to describe a particularly acausal species, many of whom are known to and named by the dark tradition, which species, when manifested in the causal, are certainly far more powerful than human beings. Thus, the conventional names given to some such acausal beings are known to us, or which have been known to human beings in ages past, are only esoteric names, only imperfect, only causal terms, which are meant to be useful symbols. Thus, a name such as Satan does not fully describe the real acausal nature and character of that specific acausal being, which acausal being has an esoteric name, an acausal name deriving from an acausal thinking and acausal knowing, which better describes such a being. The question of God. The philosophy of traditional Satanism does not assume nor accept that there is a supreme being or deity, That is, a supreme creator being does not and never has existed, and such a figure is regarded as a human, a causal abstraction, a human manufactured construct or myth, which human beings and thus certainly religions and theologies and philosophies have incorrectly imposed upon the reality of the cosmos in a vain attempt to understand it and themselves. Thus, our Satan, our Dark One, is not subservient to some omnipotent God, but is instead a particular type of living acausal being, subject only to the natural laws of the acausal continuum. The question of evil and the existence of Satan. What has been conventionally termed the question or the problem of evil by other philosophies and religions in the way of life does not exist for traditional Satanism, since traditional Satanism accepts that conventional morality is a causal abstraction, some causal form or some dogma which is incorrectly projected onto the nature, the reality of the causal continuum, and which abstraction obscures our real and are of necessity individual connection with cosmos. That is conventional morality, like all religious dogma and all laws, takes away or restricts the inalienable individual freedom of a living human being to be an individual, to be that singular, unique nexion they are to the acausal. For traditional Satanism, it is only and ever the individual who, developing acausal empathy and acausal thinking, can directly comprehend and directly implement meaning, whether this meaning be described by such a limited causal term such as morality, and evil and law-based, as these causal terms on the restriction, the oppression of causal thinking. Thus, traditional Satanism is a genuine liberation and a genuine evolution of the individual. For traditional Satanism gives the individual access to the very essence of their own individual being, which is the acausal energy that animates them, making them alive, and which is also the apprehension and understanding of them as a unique nexion of the acausal continuum itself and of the acausal life that resides there, and which can, in some circumstances, be manifested into our own causal continuum. Hence, a knowing of such acausal beings, such as Satan and Baphomet, are only one means by which we as individuals can come to know ourselves, to evolve ourselves, and to come to understand the meaning and purpose of our causal mortal lives, which is to live on beyond our causal death in the acausal continuum as a new type, a new species of immortal acausal being. This individual and unique discovery of meaning by individuals, this knowing of such acausal beings, this understanding of how and why such beings of Satan exist, is a learning of the art of dark sorcery, part of which learning is developing acausal empathy and acausal thinking, and is the transmission of this dark and ancient art, and is used by individuals, which is the raison d'etre of the sinister association known as the Order of the Nine Angles.